Hello everyone and welcome back to Student Economist, where choosing to spend your time here is infinitely better than the opportunity cost. Today, we're working on part 3 of the series. So, the paper 1 series where we're going from 2022 coming all the way down, and right here, part 3, we're doing 2020. So let's get into it, shall we? 1. Which of the following production possibility frontiers illustrates constant return? And that's simply A. We're looking for a diagram that looks like this, what I drew, which is A. Next, consumer surplus may be defined as the C, difference between total utility and total spending. On this little diagram I drew right here, I'm trying to illustrate the fact that consumer surplus really refers to the additional benefit that the consumer gains from the fact that they have a reservation price, that is the highest price that they're willing and able to pay for this good, and then the fact that the market price is actually below that good. So it's below the reservation price, sorry. So this excess between total spending and total utility showcases the fact that they're able to garner this extra benefit in terms of satisfaction or utility. So that's what consumer surplus is all about. That's what answer is C. 3, we've seen it before. As the price of good X increased from $5 to $11, the quantity supplied increased from 700 to 820. What is the value of price elasticity of supply? So right here, we remember our price elasticity of supply formula. We put it up top here. So we said PES is equal to quantity change, percentage change in quantity supplied over, I drew it badly, hold on. Okay, so it's the percentage change in quantity supplied over the percentage change in price, right? So we calculated each of those. We got 17% and we got 120%, and then you'd end up with the answer A, 0.14. Moving on, which of the following activities results in an external cost? And that's simply C. A, B, and D actually result in external benefits if you read it. So C says individuals place litter at the side of the road. So obviously that leads to external costs in terms of like, health risks and environmental hazards and such, go on, so forth. Yeah. 5 says the term effective demand refers to what consumers are able and willing to buy at a particular period of time. So really and truly, this is talking about the purchasing power of the consumer. That's the ability to buy, and then the willingness overall just is the desire of the consumer to actually buy something. That's the effective demand. 6 says, it has a little instance before, it says, due to our technical problems being experienced at the CMC bauxite plant, Mr. Brown, an engineer, suffered a pay cut. It was noticed shortly after that he purchased fewer fish fillets and more chicken parts. So 6 says, what type of good do fish fillets represent? So this is really testing our knowledge of the types of goods, right? So what we know about normal goods is that normal goods do have a positive relationship or a direct relationship between consumers' income and quantity demanded. So we see that Mr. Brown received a pay cut, that's a decrease in income, and likewise there was a decrease in the amount of fish fillets consumed. So we can see that that direct relationship, as one goes down the other goes down, indicates that fish fillets is a normal good. Likewise, for 7 it says what type of good do chicken parts represent, and you see that he actually bought more chicken parts in light of the pay cut. And as we know, for inferior goods now have a negative or inverse relationship between consumers' income and the quantity demanded of a certain good. So as you can see, he received a pay cut, decrease in income. However, he increased his consumption of chicken parts. That indicates that it's an inferior good. D. 8. It says, at which stage of production should the firm operate? And we're saying C. C is BC. BC is actually stage 2, and that is the most efficient stage of production because you find that most the companies or the firm's resources are being properly efficiently utilized, and you find that you can indicate this from the fact that at the end of stage 2, that is when total product actually reaches its maximum. Additionally, you can't really say you can't say it's stage 1, which is A to B, because that is really where resources are being underutilized, and you can't say section 3, well, stage 3, because from B to C you find that total product is actually on the decline. Um, Average product is going furthermore on the decline, and then to put the cherry on top, marginal product is actually going negative in stage 3. So really and truly, the best stage is actually C. Okay, moving on to 9. Says which segment of the curves represent the short run supply curve, and that's C, from E to H. All right, from E to H. 10 says what is the marginal cost of producing the second unit of output, and marginal cost refers to that the additional cost incurred from utilizing one more unit of output. So right now you calculate marginal cost by doing the change in total cost over change in unit, right? Change in quantity. So as we know, because in this scenario right here that they give, you increase by 1 unit as you go along. So the change in quantity will always be 1 in this scenario. But the change in total cost increase. You can see that with unit 1, the cost was $26, but then with the second unit, it was $36. So you find the change by putting 36 and then taking away 26 from it, and you end up getting 10, which is A. And then as over 1, so obviously you'd end up with 10. 11 says, which area in the diagram depicts consumer surplus? Consumer surplus, again we spoke about it a bit earlier, where we talked about the market price and the reservation price, and that difference essentially indicating consumer surplus. And then we just mark that area by saying that it's put, right? So put would be P, where you extrapolate to the y curve, the y-axis, to say that that's the market price, and then U would be the reservation price, the highest price, the maximum price that the consumer is willing to pay, and then T would represent that actual equilibrium point right there on the graph. So the answer would be A. 12 says, what is the most likely reason for the fall in price from OP1 to OP2? And that's really, as you can see, it's indicative on the graph. There's a shift from S0 to S1, and rightward shift, and that's an increase in supply. So B. 13. A baker can bake any of 2 combinations of cakes and loaves of bread using the following options. What is the opportunity cost of producing 1 cake? So remember how we went about this? We went about it by saying that in order to produce 3 more cakes, the baker actually has to give up 21 loaves of bread. So seeing that we know that it takes 21 loaves of bread to get 3 cakes, we can essentially use arithmetic to find out how many loaves of bread need to be given up to just get 1 more cake. And then we just do the inverse proportion right here. If x is equal to 21, x is equal to 7. So the answer will be C, 7. Which of the following, for 14, is an example of a normative economic statement? And that's A. The government should provide free medication for senior citizens. The operative word is should, which always indicates that it's a normative statement. All of these other ones can be tested using economic models, and it has grounding in economic theory. So an increase in interest rates would attract foreign investors. An increase in minimum wage would increase inflation. A reduction in the price of goods will benefit consumers. So all of these can actually be tested. So that's what makes them actually positive and not normative statements like A. Which of the following statements are true if good X is an inferior good? Remember, we said there's a negative relationship between income and quantity demanded for an inferior good, and we see that with D. Income elasticity of demand is negative, D. Seen this question before, guys. 16 says, Mumu Limited is a part of the milk industry where there are a few large firms that gives it away already. It's a oligopoly. And it also talks about controlling prices with its in oligopoly there's sticky prices or price rigidity, and then there's high barriers to entry or exit, which is also a hallmark of oligopolies. BuzzBuzz says they operate in the honey industry where there's hundreds of price taking firms, so hundreds meaning that there's many sellers, and price taking, which is also a very important element of perfect competition. In fact, it's the only industry that actually takes the price from the industry. It's the only market structure that takes the price from the industry. So that gives it away for perfect, which will end up giving us the answer of C. 17 says John purchased the auto insurance policy. 1 week later, he carelessly drove his car into a wall. This scenario is an example of a moral hazard. So overall, just the increase in recklessness due to the fact that he bought the insurance. Next, 18 says positive economic profit exists where C average revenue is greater than average cost. Okay, continuing. It says based on the size of the Herfindahl-Hirschman index for the data in the table above, how would this market be described? Again, remember how to calculate the HHI. We have to list out the market shares of each firm and square them. So that's 50, 25, 10, 10 again, 3 and 2. And this would all add up to 3,338. And then remember we say that anything above 1,800 would be considered highly concentrated. So the answer will be C. 20 says the term deadweight loss can be described as B, a decrease in the net welfare of society. So this is where social marginal benefit is not equal to social marginal cost. We say 21 says which of the following statements is true? Output Q1 is efficient because social marginal benefit is equal to social marginal cost, and that's true. This is where the society actually wants production to take place because it's most optimal. 22 says which of the following situations represents a negative externality? And again, we know the answer from prior papers is that private cost private cost is less than social cost. That gives rise to an external cost. Alright, 23 says what level of profit is being made by the firm, and we see that this is normal profit because the profit from the profit maximizing point, that is where MR equal MC right here. As you go up along, you find that the profit maximizing line, so to speak, actually coincides with this point of the AR curve as well as this minimum point of the AC curve. So you can find that when you extrapolate to the y-axis, the price is actually the same as the cost. So if the price, that shows that AR is equal to AC, which is which indicates normal profit, because this shows that the firm is making the minimum profits necessary to sustain business, which is normal profit, A. To maximize profit, firms should produce at the output level where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. MC is equal to MR. And as you can see right here, they do it. Because right here, this is where MR equal MC, and then they extrapolate upwards to the AR curve, which is also the demand curve. Right? Moving on to 25, it says, which of the following areas represents the deadweight loss to society if production level is at G? So remember, we always look for the optimum. That's where SMC is equal to SMB right here. And then we find that we're producing at output level G, which is right here. Right? And we're essentially trying to get to here. And you find that this is what we call an external cost. This distance right here between the PMC and the SMC is external cost. And this excess of an external cost is actually causing the deadweight loss, which is represented in this little area right here, which we call ZXY, which is A. From the diagram, what does the distance XY represent? And as we saw before, this would give us the external cost, which is B. Alright, moving on to 27. 27 says if there were no healthcare insurance available, what would be the equilibrium price and quantity of healthcare? And that would actually be A. That is P2 and Q2, which is right here. Then we say in 28, on which of the following assumptions is perfect competition based? They do not have perfect control of the price. Remember, we say that they're price takers. They actually take their price from the industry, so they don't have any control actually. We'll skip B for now, but we say C, large number of big firms. That is not true. There's a large number of firms, but they're very small. They don't have a lot of market share. And then D says it's a small number of individual firms. No, there's actually many buyers in the perfectly competitive market. It's just that there are individual firms, but there isn't a small number. If they said large number, then that answer would be right. But right here, where it says, oh, sorry, I made a mistake here. I should have said small. There should be a large number of individual firms because there are many sellers in the perfectly competitive market. Many sellers, many buyers. So that is why B would actually be the answer, because there is a large number of buyers. B. Flintstone Quarries Limited is aware of the negative environmental impacts of the quarrying activities in Bedrock Hills. The company therefore organizes an annual reforestation drive and also maintains a small park and recreation grounds for the community of Bedrock Hills. The scenario represents an example of corrective market failure via the adoption of D, corporate social responsibility. So you find that they're aware of the fact that they have their negative impacts on the environment, and then they embrace their corporate social responsibility through the fact that they're doing an annual reforestation drive. Right? So this goes to show that they're trying to be a good custodian of the environment, and they're embracing the fact that they do have implications on the environment and the community at large. So you see them doing the reforestation drive and also creating a small park and a recreational ground for the same community. So it's all about giving back to the community in order to correct the market failure of negative externalities. Okay, 30. It says, which of the following factors is not likely to cause a shift in the supply curve for labor? And we're saying the answer is really D, due to the fact that this would actually cause, remember, first of all, the cost of labor is actually wages, right? And the cost of labor would actually cause a movement along the supply curve, which can either be expansionary or contractionary. So right here, I could just sketch a quick diagram to illustrate. So we have wages on this axis, and then the quantity of labor on the x-axis. And right here, I could probably have a supply curve to show you supply of labor. And you find that if the cost of labor, which is wages, increases, you find that there will be a movement along the curve. Right? So this would be a movement along the curve. There would be no shift. You would have to actually have SL probably moving to the right or left, but there is no movement of the supply curve from the right to the left or anything of that. So it has to be this for this question. The other ones, birth rate, population growth, and increase in skilled workers, would actually cause a shift. Okay. Next question, 31, says, a shift in the demand curve from DD to D1D1 results in a decrease in economic rent. The demand for a factor of production is a derived demand. This means that the demand for the factor is determined by D, the demand for the product the factor makes. Again, we can talk about the teacher example where teachers aren't necessarily demanded by the end user, because they're really demanded for the fact that they are the quote-unquote intermediary good between the initial input and actually the educational services that teachers are needed for. So the real good are the demand for that product. The final product is really the educational services. But in order to get the educational services, there needs to be a demand for teachers, and this is what the derived demand stems from. 33 says, which of the following terms describes the relationship between factor rewards and the cost of production? So again, we look at the four factors of production: land, labor, capital, and enterprise, which are all accrue their own rewards. So you have rent, wages, interest, and profits. And the more you get these factors of production, the more reward you can possibly get. So there's a positive relationship. C. 34 says the total cost of cutting trees for lumber and firewood results in D, increased chance of flooding plus the private cost of cutting down trees. Just always remember this. Social cost is equal to private cost plus external costs. And the same is for benefits. Social benefit is equal to private benefit plus external benefit. Always ensure that when you're talking about total social costs. 35 says, which of the following factors is likely to cause an increase in the wage rate of construction workers? And we say the answer is A, because this is, first of all, for housing is considered like a need or something demanded by the workers in terms of their income. So therefore, to get housing, you need to have income. And if the overall market price of housing is going to increase, they're going to demand more income from wherever they work. And in this case, construction workers will demand for an increase in wages in order to offset that increase in the housing which they demand with their income. So yeah, the answer will be A. 36 says, Mr. and Mrs. Smith can afford to send their children to school, buy groceries, and pay their rent. However, they cannot afford to save or even buy or even own a car. This is an example of C, relative poverty. This is really where in the textbook they talk about the fact that relative poverty refers to the ability for somebody to actually purchase their basic goods. However, they would be considered as relatively poor because their income would fall under the nation's the nation's average real income. So in this case, they're insinuating that the average real income in that country can also buy a car, but Mr. and Miss Smith are still able to cover their basic needs. So they would not be in basic poverty, or they wouldn't be in absolute poverty, but they would more so be in relative poverty, because they're still above the quote-unquote poverty line. 37 says, which of the following segments represents labor supply? And that's B, A to B, this segment right here. Okay, which of the following factors would have most likely caused the shift above? And then for this question, we're going to say the answer is B, a rise in the worker productivity, and 3, which says a rise in the price of the final good. So remember, with the MRP curve, we are talking about some derived demand, and in this case, we're talking about the derived demand for labor. So if the overall productivity of the workers increase, they would demand more workers because they would be able to actually produce more, and with producing more, they'll be able to earn more. So that's why the firm will demand more labor, as shown by the shift from MRP1 to MRP2. And likewise, an increase in the final price, in the price of the final good, will also stimulate a shift outwards, in the sense that with the higher price, on the producer end, there's potential to make more profit. So there would be an increase in the demand for labor in that regard. 39 says, a trade union successfully bargains for a wage increase in an imperfectly competitive labor market. What is most likely the consequence of this action in the labor market? That would be D, an increase in the quantity of labor demanded. Again, we're going to do a quick sketch. So this will be the labor, this will be wages, this will be the quantity demanded of labor, quantity demanded and supplied of labor. Sorry, we're going to make our quick demand for labor, supply for labor. D. D is S, which has a Gini coefficient of 0.9. So the closer you are to 0 is actually the more even the income distribution is within your country, and likewise the closer you are to 1 is the more uneven the income distribution is in your country. So as you can see, S is the closest one to 1, so the answer would be D. And the last question we say, which of the following factors is least likely to contribute to poverty alleviation in our country? And again, through past papers, we've seen that the answer is D, an increased regression in the tax system. What needs to happen is actually a progressive tax system that would lead to poverty alleviation. But instead, they have given us the opposite with regression. So that would actually make poverty worse. It would exacerbate it. And just like that, we reach the end of the video, guys. I do hope that you have learned something from this. Please remember that the price to learn is 0, so raise the demand for excellence.